Alright, so today's video we are comparing the Sony FX3 right here on my right against the Canon R5C on my left. By the way, thank you B&H Photo, my good friends over at B&H, for sending over the Canon R5C for me to play with for, I think I'm late on giving it back, honestly. It's been like a month and a half, so should have been back like 2 weeks ago. I'm gonna have to send them a little message. Maybe they forgot about it, maybe I just keep it, who knows. I'll leave links to both cameras and both lenses that I'm using for B&H in the description below. So both of these cameras been out a little while and I've been kind of tossing around how am I gonna compare these cameras, because I'm not gonna go over spec for spec and every little detail as if these cameras were brand spanking new. There's plenty of reviews out on both of these things. So I think we're just gonna kind of go over different categories and who I think won what category. I was initially gonna make this into a YouTube short, but there's just a little too much to turn it into a short. I would have been
talking like this, it would have been crazy. I would have been like, the Canon R5C doesn't have the greatest autofocus, but the colors are really good. But the Sony FX3 is...
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked. You guys would have clicked off really quick. I'm gonna try to let both of these cameras run the entire time. The Sony FX3 I know will make it through the shoot. The Canon, we'll see. We'll see. Which brings me to my first point. As you guys have probably heard about the Canon R5C, is the battery life is not fantastic. So for battery life, that category unquestionably goes to the Sony FX3. With no EVF and a much smaller fan hump, I'm gonna also have to give size and weight and portability over to the FX3. It's a much smaller camera, much lighter, a lot easier to work with, but the grip is still really nice on the FX3. Speaking of fans, you have complete control over your fan on the Sony FX3, whereas the Canon R5C, you don't. You can kind of just switch between like higher and lower setting modes, but in video mode, the fan is always going. Luckily, it's not loud, so that's good, but the fan category goes over to the FX3. How I normally have it set is when I hit that record button, the fan stops. And then when I stop recording, then it kicks in again and cools it down. Resolution options, this one is another win for the R5C. You can go all the way up to 8K, 60 frames per second with a power supply, and with the Sony FX3, you go up to 4K, 120 frames per second, which is more than enough resolution for me, but it's always nice to have that extra resolution to play with if you need it. So 8K for the win on the R5C. On to dynamic range. This is a pretty easy win for Sony and S-Log3. It's just some of the best dynamic range that you could find out there. It doesn't really get much better than Sony's newer cameras shooting S-Log3. The FX3 has IBIS, the R5C doesn't, so take that however you want. I'm personally gonna give a win to Sony. All right, active steady shot is on the FX3. Sorry about the wind noise, guys. We don't have a stabilized lens. This is the new 24-70 f2.8 version 2. I find that active steady shot does a pretty good job. Now on the R5C, we have a stabilized lens with the 15-35 f2.8. and we have digital IS turned on, and I've always liked Canon's digital image stabilization. Just the normal mode, no reason to go into the enhanced mode. I think the normal mode works fine. It does seem like we're cropped in a little bit more on the R5C. We were at 24mm on both lenses just to keep it even Steven. And this frame does look a little bit tighter. The R5C shoots 45 megapixel stills, whereas the FX3 only shoots 12. So for a hybrid camera and hybrid shooters, I would say that the R5C is probably the better choice, whereas the FX3 is mainly a video-centered camera. Autofocus goes to the Sony FX3, just performs great. The R5C hunts a lot. It's not as good as the R5 was in video, and I still don't know why. I don't know why changing the menu system on the same exact sensor made the autofocus worse. Now, it might be performing okay now because I'm not really moving around a lot, but when I was out in the field shooting with it, getting some test shots, it hunts around a lot, whereas the FX3 pretty much sticks to whatever you want it to stick to and locks right on it. Now for the menu systems, this is a hard one for me to judge because people normally go with what they know and what they're used to. Like, I breeze right through the Sony menu system, and I really like the additions to the menu system on the FX3 2.0 firmware, so I'm gonna personally choose the FX3. I like the way everything is laid out better. I feel like it's a lot easier to get to where I have to go, and I can get the settings set up a lot quicker. Whereas the R5C, I feel like has even more in-depth settings to it, but it almost feels like too much. It's like, geez, there's a lot to go through here, man. I just want to turn on, I just want to shoot. So again, it's a toss up, but for me personally, I'm used to Sony's menu system and I like the FX3's menu, but if you happen to be used to Canon Cinema Line's menu system, then you might prefer the R5C better. Now, both cameras you could load custom LUTs to, which I love. I love having that option, and I love that they bought that in the new update for the FX3. But the FX3 actually has an advantage because number one, you could load up to 16 custom LUTs. Whatever LUTs you want, you could load them right onto that camera, and you could use them to either monitor your footage but still export in Sony S-Log3 so that you can color grade later, or you have the option of baking your LUT in to the FX3's footage if you just want something quick and ready to rock straight out of camera. Whereas the R5C, you don't have those options. It's just a monitoring LUT only, and you can't load 16 of them. So that category will go to the FX3 as well. For low light, I'm gonna give that category to the FX3 as well. Both cameras do have dual native ISOs. The Canon R5C is 800 and 3200, whereas the FX3, I don't know, has a weird situation that still nobody can explain to me. It was 640 and 12,800, which it still is sometimes, but in certain modes, it's 800 and 12,800, which I don't get. I just don't understand. But I shoot in a mode where it is 640 and 12,800. So you get a much, much higher second base ISO on the FX3, so that's why I give low light to the FX3. For pricing, the Sony FX3 comes in at almost $1,000 cheaper, and you get just one of my favorite accessories, which is the XLR handle that essentially is the K3M, but the thing with this handle is you could lock it in with the screws, so you could actually use it as a handle, which I do all the time. Especially on events when I'm carrying this camera around handheld all the time, I use it right by the handle, which is great. So $1,000 cheaper, and you get a really great XLR handle, which I'm recording all my audio into right now. So the audio from this video is being recorded into the FX3 on the XLR handle. Real quick, I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, FX Home by Artlist. FX Home is where you can find the free video and VFX editing software HitFilm that lets you learn the basics and start creating amazing content right away. HitFilm has all the tools you need to create your first video, like 3D tools, drag and drop transitions, presets, audio sync, text tools, free integrated music and sound effects, along with easy to use customizable templates. FX Home also offers affordable subscription tiers for their more advanced users, like their creator and pro plans starting at just $625 a month. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can head over to FX Home and check it out for yourself. Thank you, FX Home, for sponsoring today's video. Now, for exposure options, I think this one is a clear win for the R5C. You have shutter angle on the R5C, you have waveform, you have false colors, you have zebras. Hopefully we get one more firmware update out of Sony for the FX3. Probably not, given how long it's taken just to get firmware 2.0 on the FX3. I don't see them really giving us another huge significant update for this camera, so I'm definitely gonna give it to the R5C. Now for screens, I have like my problems with the R5C. I've had situations where I have a hard time seeing it on a bright sunny day, whereas the FX3, I didn't struggle at all. If you don't have display assist on, it's like impossible to see your screen shooting in C-Log3 outdoors on a sunny day. So the flip screen for me goes to the FX3, even though I like the touchscreen options more on the R5C. Also, somebody else confirmed this in my last R5C video. The flip screen on the R5C doesn't completely flip out. If you have a Canon R5C, check it. Flip the screen out and turn it downward and see if it's completely flush. Overall, my personal opinion, I'm gonna stick with Sony and stick with the FX3. This is my favorite camera to date still. I would like next time around to basically just have the exact same camera with some 8K options on it. Just give me the FX3 with 8K basically. I don't shoot stills, so the hybrid stills camera doesn't really do much for me. And in video mode, really when it comes down to it, I think you're getting better performance out of the FX3 than you are the R5C. You're getting better battery life, you're getting way better autofocus, you're getting better dynamic range, and I think just a more reliable camera. So for me, it's the Sony FX3, but the Canon R5C, I won't bash it. I think it's a really great camera. Let me know in the comment section below, do you guys have an R5C or an FX3, which one do you like better? Do you enjoy shooting with your camera? What problems do you have? Do you agree with the things I said here today? Let me know down below. Thank you FX Home for sponsoring today's video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you later. Yeah.